Hey everyone, welcome back to Untangled Vines podcast. Today we're going to be talking about how to build a remote and hybrid company that never misses a step. Now, I might sound a little bit different because I'm recovering from COVID. Don't recommend it. Don't recommend getting it. But so bear with me if I have to take a couple deep breaths and catch everything. But I wanted to stay consistent with this podcast because I think it's very important and it's very timely that we continue to talk about the future of work and redefining the rules of work. And so the goal with this episode today is to show you specific steps that you can take in your organization to make sure that your company and your employees have what they need to be successful in a remote and or hybrid company. So a few of the things that we're going to be talking about is exploring the key elements of what you need to have. Now, in all honesty, this is not just for remote and hybrid organizations. It's for all of them. All organizations need what we're going to be talking about. Some of them will be specific to hybrid and remote, but the goal here is that whenever you are remote and hybrid, you have to be intentional. Now, I know that I've said that in several other podcasts so far, but whenever I say intentionality for remote and hybrid, what I mean is if you're in an office, you are able to walk over to somebody's desk and ask them a quick question. But in a remote, maybe a hybrid environment, you're not necessarily able to do that. You have to ping them. You have to schedule a call or you have to text them. Whatever the case is, you have to be intentional. And now this is where it becomes very important for organizations of a hybrid and remote model need to pay attention. Okay, so let's just go ahead and start with the first step. This is the first step for any organization to understand what is going to work for them, right? So, first step, number one, you need to assess your company's needs based off of your culture. This is very, very specific to what your organization needs and how you operate. What are your behaviors? What are your goals? What is your strategy? Who are your employees and what type of work are you producing? What type of companies do you work with? So let me break it down just a little bit. So whenever I say assess your culture, what I'm talking about is start by evaluating your company's goals, your needs, and your culture. You want to consider what tasks require physical presence and what can be done remotely. By doing this, first of all, you're going to be able to determine, do we have to have a hybrid model or can we go 100% remote? Right? So that's one of the first things that you want to decide. But then you also want to bring in your employees. You could do this through a survey or just a quick call and asking different employees, but you want to understand their preferences, their concerns, their challenges related to remote work or in-office work or the mixture of both. So assess the situation, determine by speaking to your employees and having a full on brainstorm of what matters most and what you're trying to achieve, and identify what needs to be done in the office, what needs to be done or what can be done remotely. And if you don't have to be in the office at all, how can we do this all remotely? And then you put into place the next step, which is a clear work policy. Now, if you're hybrid, you can have a clear hybrid work policy. If you're remote, you can have a clear remote policy. And if you're in office, you'll have a in-office policy as well. But this is going to be the development of a comprehensive hybrid or remote work policy that outlines the rules and expectations for both remote and in-office work. The importance of this, and we have a blog post about this coming out soon if it's not already on the website by the time this launches. We have a blog about how you can create your remote work policy or your hybrid work policy. But again, this is going to be rules and expectations. This goes back to intentionality. So whenever you're creating your work policy for whatever type of model, working model that you're going to be participating in, hybrid, remote, whatever the case is, you want to make sure that this includes guidelines for your employees. Just for example, some of them could be the guidelines for working hours. Do you want your employees to be 9 to 5? Or are you okay with them coming in at 10, leaving at 2, but doing the rest of the work at home? Or if they are working remotely, are you more focused on outcome-driven approaches, right? Where the working hours don't really matter as long as you're getting the work done and you're not slowing anybody else down. The other parts of the guideline are going to be communication, collaboration tools. How do we communicate? What channels do we use for specific things? What collaboration tools are we using to get this stuff done? The whole purpose of a work policy is to, again, set those rules and expectations for people to understand what needs to happen whenever they're working remotely, or whether they're working hybrid, or how remote employees will interact with hybrid employees in the office. Those are very, very, very important things, because the thing with either 100% in office or 100% remote, you know that everybody is working the same at all times. But we've seen that hybrid models are becoming very, very popular. So how do we make sure that everybody is being updated if they're in the office and then some of them are at home or working remotely or vice versa? You have to set these clear rules and expectations so everybody stays in alignment, which actually leads into the number 3, which is investing in the right technology and infrastructure to support the type of remote or hybrid model that you choose. Now, obviously, this is Untangled Vines, an extension of Grapevine software, the virtual office platform for your remote and hybrid workforce to stay connected and engaged. So we're going to obviously say that one of the best things that you can do in the near future is invest in Grapevine, a virtual office where everybody can communicate and collaborate together in one application or one software, right? You can give updates on the intranet. You can build a culture on the community. You can have your My Office to keep everything organized, as well as have your one-on-ones and your digital workspace with you and your manager to have great relationships. You can have impromptu meetings using our virtual break room and our unique approach to that, as well as your department portals to keep everybody in that specific department updated, or bring them on and have remote training that everybody goes through. So that's what we're talking about here, is that infrastructure, that technology that is going to allow your employees to be in the office, not in the office, working remotely, working from anywhere, but still staying connected and updated on every single thing that they need to be updated on. Now, a few of the other things that we have to talk about whenever we're talking about technology is laptops. How are we going to have that logistics set up whenever somebody's onboarding, where we make sure that they have the laptops, a secure VPN, the collaboration software, Grapevine. But then you also want to invest in IT infrastructure that supports remote and in-office work seamlessly. So whether they're in the office or not, you have the right type of structure that supports your employees and provides them with what they need to continue to do their work appropriately. I got to take a second to take a sip of water. COVID's no joke, people. Okay. So, number 4 is flexible scheduling. Now, what we're talking about here is allowing employees to have flexible schedules within reason, because you want to accommodate their personal needs and preferences. For example, real life example is mine. Whenever I was working at Kumu, whenever I'm doing consulting, I don't have to worry about scheduling a haircut appointment and going to that haircut appointment at 2:00 in the afternoon. As long as it doesn't interfere with the work that I have to do, with the deadlines that I have, with the meetings that I have scheduled, all that stuff, right? The flexible schedule, in other words, is allow your employees to have that flexibility, that autonomy to be able to complete and do their best work when they are present. Some people aren't morning people. Some people aren't night people. Some people aren't middle of the day people, right? So if you allow your employees to have a more flexible schedule, you're probably going to get more out of them, and they're going to be happier. And the happier a worker is, the more likely they're going to stay with that company. So retention is better. And the more likely that you're going to get better work out of them. Right now, with the work policy, going back to that, you're able to already counteract some of these issues, because I think that's where hybrid and remote work scares a lot of executives or CEOs or leaders, is because if they are in the office, they can see them working, or it looks like they're working, right? Like, just because you see them at a computer doesn't actually mean that they're working. But in the past, before COVID or before pre-pandemic, you or leaders looked at their employees in butts in seats, is how I've heard it, butts in seats, and they see them at the computer, but in reality they might just be bullshitting, like, I know that I've gone into organizations or a position where I wasn't having the best day, but I know that I needed to show up because that was the norm, that was what was expected. And when I showed up that day that I wasn't feeling great, I probably only got like 2 hours of work done, versus if I was able to be at home, take a little bit of a rest, knock out 2 hours of work, take another little bit of a rest, knock out 2 more hours, do the whole thing again, right? Now I'm producing 8 hours of work sporadically, rather than going into work for 8 hours, sitting at the computer feeling dead, right? Like right now is a prime example. If I was working right now straight through the day, I would be exhausted. After this podcast, I'm going to be exhausted. So that's what we're talking about. You want to consider the core hours when all employees should be available for meetings and collaboration. But other than that, give your people the flexibility that they need, right? Okay. So the other thing that we're talking about is performance management. This is, I'm running out of the numbers. I think 5. I'll probably continue and get lost on this, but 5, performance manage. So this kind of goes in hand with the flexible scheduling, which is we want to shift towards outcome-based performance management rather than measuring hours worked. So set clear performance goals and regularly communicate expectations with employees. You'll see, maybe interchangeably, intentionality and setting expectations, clear expectations for employees, for clients, for company. This is what is going to bring you success whenever you're working in a remote or a hybrid model, right? So the outcome-based performance management rather than measuring hours worked is honestly, why did we ever look at hours worked? Unless hours worked contributed to the amount of output. Now, theoretically or logically, that might make sense. Okay, I remember the Elon Musk quote is like, if you work 100 hours compared to somebody's 40 hours, then you're going to do twice as much as they do in a week. Technically, that is what should happen. But that is meaning that you are physically or deliberately, because that's a big thing too, deliberately working 100 hours compared to that other person's deliberate 40 hours. But that's not how work works, right? For example, if I work a 10-hour day, 8 of those hours are probably working hours for me. Or let's even say, like on a bad day, let's say it's 6 hours of those 10 hours, or 8 or 7 hours, right? And what I mean by that is that, like, there's breaks in between, there's time for lunch and dinner and breakfast, there's other things that maybe I got distracted or I daydreamed or I was tired or whatever the case is, right? It doesn't actually make sense to base somebody's performance on hours work. Now, this kind of goes back to what Google and other large tech companies are thinking about doing, which is they've been trying to get people back in the office. So they're going to start measuring or adding a performance metric for the amount of times they worked in the office. And so, but that, so I've already beat that dead horse. That does not mean that that person is more productive. It just means that they have more hours clocked in a physical space, right? So whenever we shift towards outcome based, we're actually only focusing on what matters. So it doesn't matter if it takes me 4 hours to do something that it would take somebody else 20 hours to do. If that's the case, like, if I can work 4 hours and get exactly the same thing done as what this other person could do in 20 hours, why should I have to wear that burden of working 16 more hours in a seat just to say I'm performing, right? So, okay, so one of the ways that you can do this, just to make it tactical or practical, I always get those confused. You can use key performance indicators, or you can use objectives and key results, or you could use a mixture of both. So KPIs or OKRs. The reason that I like OKRs or KPIs is because it, one, should be attached to your company's strategy and then ultimately pushed down to your team strategy, your manager's strategy, and then to yours. And so whenever you have this strategy clearly defined, now you're able to build off of it and create your own objective that says, okay, I'm going to do blah, blah, blah. And then the key results, if we're using OKRs, is the key result is how am I going to achieve the objective or the what? And so that key result should be measurable. It should be quantitative. In some cases, it can be qualitative depending on different scenarios, but you definitely want to have quantitative metrics here, because that is going to tell you if somebody is actually performing, whether or not they're in the office, out of the office, working 4 hours a week, working 70 hours a week, right? It doesn't matter, because you are measuring them against what the goal for them is and what the goals for the company are. So that is a key thing. Okay. So if you can't tell, I'm passionate about that one because I'm a big believer in OKRs. I'm a big believer in KPIs. And that is how you make a company hybrid and remote work without missing a step. Is you set those clear goals and you track towards those goals. And if someone is not meeting those goals, you coach and guide them to help them meet that. Or if they can't meet that, you have to get them out of the company because they're not doing what you expect of them. That's how you measure performance, not number of hours worked. Okay, so in addition to making a remote and hybrid company work without missing a step is communication and transparency and inclusivity, right? And I think this will be the last one that I talk about here because it's getting a little bit long, but these are some of the key things that you need to make a remote and hybrid work. So whenever it comes to communication and inclusivity, you want to ensure that remote employees do not feel excluded from in-office discussions and social activities. Now that's where Grapevine comes in, because whether you're hybrid, whether you're in the office or working remotely, you have one system to connect everybody to stay connected and engaged and build culture with our community and our intranet and more things than just those, but I'll just keep it quick there. But you want to make sure that you also have a communication strategy to always include people. So it might be that you, for example, in Grapevine, you might go to the community page or your internal social network and you post something that gets everybody engaged. Or on the internet, you have the birthdays that are coming up, or you celebrate somebody who achieved something. This could go either way on the internal social network or on the internet. But you celebrate these people on what they're doing, not just from a professional standpoint, but you can also get personal too. Like I got married November 6, 2021. And in the leadership team meeting, our CEO brought it up. And I actually showed him a picture and he brought it up and we talked about it and celebrated. It was a way for me to feel included, right? And now I already felt included because we had a great team who made that a intention and they focus on that. So now this other point goes exactly to what I'm saying with like Grapevine, but use collaboration tools for company-wide communication and encourage informal interactions. Again, the way that our break room will work is you click the button. It's like a coffee with a clock over it icon. You click that, it takes you into the break room, and then it announces to people on your team or it announces people in the company, hey, Zach is in the break room. Would you like to join him? If you can, you can. If you don't, you don't. But it's a way for people to stay included, stay connected, and all those types of things. So the real point here, whether it's with the tool or whatever, is you want to have a communication strategy that is intentional and that it includes everyone. Maybe not everyone every single time, but it calls out certain people in a way that they are okay with being called out. Right. So it could be like, Zach, great job on your presentation to the leadership board today because you talked about XYZ, and you give that feedback, which is another feature of Grapevine, and you can make it public or you can make it private, but just make sure that you're being intentional whenever you're acknowledging these things. Okay, so I said that those are going to be the last ones, but I do want to say one more thing about the last step here is training and development. This is a big thing that I've noticed whenever it comes to remote work. People have training materials, but they don't have a full-on training and development program. And that is key, non-negotiable for having a successful hybrid and remote organization. Because one, if you onboard people appropriately and you make them feel like they belong to the organization as quick as possible, they're more likely to stay at an organization. So you're saving money from turnover and you're keeping those people longer. And the longer you have the employee, that they're going to be the COVID's kicking in. They're going to be able to help you train other people. They're going to be more, they're going to be, you're going to have more knowledge in your organization that can be spread out to your new hires as it continues. So it's going to be a flywheel, so to speak. But training and development, you want to invest in training programs, not just onboarding, continuously develop your workers. And then specifically, you want to invest in training programs to help develop remote work skills, time management, and digital literacy. Those are some things that most people aren't talking about, but you want to have those as a feature of your training and development program in a remote and hybrid organization. And just the last thing here, which is still on training and development, I've read that a lot of people or companies say that you can't develop employees to grow within the company in a remote environment. And that's just not true. 100% it goes back to intentionality. So I'll just leave it at that. Let me see if I can remember the key things. So assess your company's needs and culture. Define a clear hybrid work policy or remote work policy, whatever matches what your company is doing. You want to invest in the right technology and infrastructure. You want to have flexible scheduling. You want to shift towards outcome-based performance management rather than measuring hours worked. You want to have clear communication, transparency, and inclusivity. And then you want to focus on training and development that is very intentional for what you're trying to do in your organization. I hope this made sense and I wasn't just rambling with this COVID brain, but I appreciate everyone who has listened to this podcast so far. If you are a remote and hybrid or future of work pioneer, please follow, subscribe, like this episode, and follow our channel. If you know somebody else, share it with them. This is the whole goal of Untangled Vines. We want to redefine the rules of work. And the only way that we do that is if we build a community of like-minded people like you guys who are listening today. So again, thanks for listening to Untangled Vines, and we'll see you on the next episode.